Yes, I would like to say welcome to this lecture today, the 27th of July 2022. We are in Martinus Centre, Klint, 100 kilometers northwest of Copenhagen. We are in the first of two international weeks, and the theme of week number 1 is reincarnation and evolution. And what I'm going to talk about tonight, heredity and environment, talents and repetition. Oh, now I'm updated. Yes, I'm working very much with myself in order to become a better person, and I'm trying to look like an angel. Can you see my wings are sort of start of growing? No. I have studied biochemistry and biology at the university, and I'm very fascinated by the DNA molecules with a double spiral. I find genetics with genes and chromosomes very interesting, and we are going to treat the theme of evolution during this week. And I have written a book on evolution, and the title of my book is Martinus, Darwin and Intelligent Design, a new theory of evolution. And the new theory of evolution is a theory of Martinus evolution. And there are different theories, and in the late 1980s, there was this new theory, intelligent design theory. And there were some scientists who examined nature, and they found that nature was so ingeniously constructed, the organisms of plants and animals that were so ingenious, they couldn't understand how that should come up by chance. They thought there must be some kind of intelligent design behind the ingenious organisms of plants and animals. And they published books on this new theory, the intelligent design theory. And originally they wanted to teach the Bible in the schools. They wanted to teach the Genesis, how God created the world. But they were not allowed to teach that in the schools because it was religion. And then they said, okay, but Darwin, that is a hypothesis, it's a theory. Now we are coming with a new theory, and that is that there is an intelligent design behind it. And there was also a lot of biochemists and so on who argued for the intelligence behind the nature. But if we should treat this theme of heredity and environment, it's a big discussion. And this discussion has been maybe for more than 100 years. What is most important in evolution? Is it our heredity, or is it the environment where we are living? And they are still discussing that. And what would intelligent design theory say about that? They would say that the genes and chromosomes, they pass on from generation to generation in an unchanged form. The intelligent design theory think there is no continuous evolution. They can, at the maximum, accept there can be a little kind of microevolution. But in a way, it's the biblical story with God created the living beings just as they are. A giraffe, an elephant, a human being, once for all, they are created in this form. They cannot change. So they stress that the most important factor must be heredity, but it is unchangeable, it's constant. And then there are the Darwinists. Darwin has made a new theory of evolution, and that it's gave a very big conflict between Church and Darwin, because Darwin argued for the fact that evolution was continuous and gradually. And that was the opposite of intelligent design theory, that the organisms were created once and for all in this form they had. But among the materialistic biologists, there are also two schools, sort of. And some of the materialistic biologists, they stress the importance of the heredity. They stress the most important thing is the genes and chromosomes with which you are born. But then there are also some other materialistic biologists, so-called socio-biologists. They think that there are very big cultural factors in, for example, the evolution of man, that the environment plays a very important role. And there is still a discussion which is most important. For example, we can often see that if there are musicians and they get children, very often the children also become musicians. Or if it is a politician, the children will also become politicians. Or scientists will get children who are studying science. So it might look as if the cultural factor, that the environment has the biggest influence. But on the other hand, it could also be the genes that had the biggest influence. Here in Denmark, we are very proud of our football players. And the most famous, I think, was Michael Laudrup and Brian Laudrup. But their father, he was also a player at the national team of football, and the mother in handball. They were born into a sports family, sort of, and they were very big athletes. So you could also say that must be the environment. But others will say that they were born with genes for being good sportsmen. So you can really discuss that, whether one or the other factor is the most important. And then there is also Martinus' theory of evolution. And to put it very short, Martinus thinks, yes, there is an intelligent design behind the organisms. He argues for that our eye is a kind of camera, and a camera, that is an invention. And there are different organs. He argues for that they had once been machines, but then they were sort of put into flesh and blood. For example, you could say the heart is a kind of pump that can pump around, but first a pump was invented in a physical form, in a mechanical form. Or also the kidneys, they are filtering the blood, so that you have also machines that can filter different liquids. So there is this argue from Martinus' side. There are more arguments, but I won't go into details with that. But according to Martinus, the nature is so ingenious constructed that it must be designed. That cannot be created by chance, by random mutations and so on. That's impossible. But on the other hand, Martinus also thinks there is a continuous and a gradual evolution. So from that point of view, Martinus and Darwin, they agree on a continuous and gradual evolution. But the main point in the Darwinistic evolution is that there are some random changes in the DNA molecules. These come around by chance. And then you can see in nature that the living beings are struggling for their life. And if there is some of these hazardous changes that gives an advantage in the struggle for life, they will survive and become transferred to the coming generations. But most of these hazardous changes in the genes and chromosomes, they are bad, and they give no advantage in the struggle of life. And for that reason, they won't be transferred to the coming generations. Only those who give an advantage can be transferred to the coming generations. So that's a very important thing in the Darwinistic evolution. I read about a gene called ASPM, and they found out that this gene helps us to get a bigger brain. That's quite good, but it takes I think it's regularly every 5,000 years there occur a mutation. So if we want to develop our brain, we just should sit so and wait for 5,000 years for the next mutation to come up. But so that's also in that way a little bit illogical. And also in the materialistic biology, there are something called comparative anatomy. And it's about, they compare, of course, the evolution of different species and also the organisms of different species, and they can compare. But there is also another kind of comparative anatomy. First, they take an individual, and then the evolution from egg or from the ovum, when the sperm cells and the egg cell are melting together, there is a zygote, this first cell. Then they follow the evolution from one cell to a grown-up adult. And they call that for ontogenesis. But then you could also compare with the evolution of the species from single cells, as individuals that are single cells, how they develop through the whole Darwinistic evolution. And then we have some worms and fishes and amphibians and reptiles and mammals and human beings. So that's a very long evolution. And that is the evolution of the species. And then I think they call that the phylogenesis. So they compare the ontogenesis with the phylogenesis, which would say that they compare the evolution of one single individual from egg to adult. And then the same, that they compare the whole evolution from single-celled organism to us. And they can see there is a lot of things that are the same. And Martinus is also talking about repetition. And when you examine the human embryo or the human fetus, they say, for example, around 12 weeks after you started, there is a little tail on the human embryo. And that you can compare to, it is a residual, it's something that is left from the animal kingdom. But luckily the tail is disappearing during the growth of the embryo. And there is also, I don't know how many weeks after, but there is something like gills. Fish, they have gills in order to get oxygen in the ocean. But then also in the human embryo, there is signs which are examples of this fish stage. So in a way, the human beings are also passing a fish stage and higher stages. And there are also many who compares small children to apes. Newborn children, you can take a newborn child and hang them on a string, and they have such a reflex that they can be hanging there because they have been monkeys, like apes, who have used their hands. And also, if you tickle them a little bit under their feet, I think it is called the Babinski reflex. They're also trying to grasp with their feet. But small children, they should just lay and lay in the bed. They should not climb around in trees. But why do they have these reflexes? And that is, according to Martinus, because they have a repetition of these stages. And there are also people who compare a baby's evolution with apes, and even a scientist raised his own child together with a chimpanzee child. And they developed almost at the same speed for a long time, but then sort of the chimpanzee stopped, and then the child went on in its evolution. So Martinus thinks that the reason why we can develop the evolution is based on a simple fact: experiences. Every time when we have made an experience, we have developed. And Martinus has created an eternal world picture. And to his intuitive view, he can see that all living beings are eternal. And that's the basis of his theory of evolution. And that means that we have a body of eternity. We have an eternity body. And that means that when we have made experiences, when we have trained talents, they can be stored in the eternal body. And what for me is so optimistic in the theory of evolution of Martinus, that is that no experience is wasted compared with the evolution, because it can be stored. And Martinus then talks about talent kernels, and in general he also talks about talents. If I want to become a pianist, I should train very much, very hard. And Martinus said that if a human being wants to become a genius in a piano playing or some kind of classical art, it takes 3 or 4 lives. And in that case, you should even use the greater part of your life on training, practicing, training, and practicing. And once I bought a typewriter, and I learned you shall press with this finger there and this there, and I did that for 10 years, but I didn't learn this so-called blind writing. I didn't learn it. But then I went to school and take a course, and I did exactly as and made all these exercises. And it was such a big moment for me the first time when my fingers wrote a word without my will. It was a miracle. Oh, what happened there? My fingers just wrote a word. And Martinus talks about these 3 stages in the creation of talent. There's the A stage, the B stage, and the C stage. At the A stage, you are conscious about it, and you have a wish to learn something, you have a wish to practice it, and you're conscious about it, brain conscious, stay conscious about this. This is the A stage. The B stage in the creation of a talent, that is when you start to practice. And then you are very conscious about it. This is C, D, E, F, so you can sort of learn to press the right buttons on the piano. But I cannot read these notes on paper, but I think it's fantastic. It doesn't make much sense to me. Just like Chinese writing or Arab writing, it tells me nothing. But also these notes here on the piano, that tells me nothing. But there are people who can sit there, and they can also do the sort of blind writing. They're just looking, so the fingers are running for themselves. To me, it's a miracle. And when they have trained enough, they don't even use to have any paper. They can just do that. They have become virtuously, they are playing. But to get to that extent, it takes, according to Martinus, 3 or 4 lives when you use the main part. And then, because these new talents can be stored in the eternity body. They can be transferred from life to life. And that would say then when some people are born with incredible talents, and often in television we see small children who can conduct a whole orchestra, small children who can do so and so and so, and it's a big mystery. How come that they can do all these things? And the explanation is practice, practice, practice. And now I have a little joke. That is on playing violin. There was a big artist, Yehudi Menuhin, I think, and he lived in London. He was very good on playing violin. He walked around in the streets, and then a man came up to him and asked him, "Please tell me the way to Royal Albert Hall." "Yes, practice, practice, and practice." So these talents can be transferred from life to life. But then there is also another mechanism. If I have learned a lot of things in my previous lives, and if I cannot remember the previous lives, then the good question is, how can these experiences be transferred to the day consciousness, my day consciousness in the present life? That's a good question. How can you transfer them? And there is then, apart from the principle of talent kernels, the other principle is the principle of repetition. And then you can, when you are a child and in your youth, you can play and do things that you have done in your previous lives. I like to see films of nature. And I think there are so many nature films on lions and bears and a lot of different predators. And when you see the offspring, what are they doing? What are they playing? They are attacking each other. The kids are attacking all the time. That is fun for them to play. Why are they doing so? Because they're predators. They have caught animals. They have caught their prey in that way. But when they are small, they cannot eat. They cannot catch the prey themselves. But they are playing this, and then they sort of, the talents are in the talent kernels, but the talents are transferred to the day consciousness in this life during this exercise. So they are training in doing that. I remember when we were around 5, 6, 7 years old, we always played father, mother, and child. Yeah. And girls, they like to play with dolls and so on. And what is that? That is also a repetition of hundreds of thousands marriages, father, mother, and children. But that is, then you can have this course of repetition. So you can bring it into the day consciousness of this life. Martinus was often asked if he was married. And I think most knew that he was not married. But then once when he was asked, "Are you married, Martinus?" "Yes." "Oh, are you?" "Yes, I'm married to the whole world." To all people in the whole world. But he said, that with marriage, I had a repetition when I was a little child. That was enough for me. So he didn't have to have this repetition. So there are different examples how it can be brought into your day consciousness by repetition. And if you take, for example, teenagers, then they get a new boyfriend, a new girlfriend, and maybe 2 weeks later they get a new boyfriend, or a month later a new boyfriend, and they can change partners rather quickly in that age. But then Martinus explains, yes, but they have to have a repetition of many previous marriages. And for that reason, they will change partners relatively quickly. But there is also in Livets Bog, book number 5, he deals with the question, how many times or how many lives can you be married to the same person? And he says, of course, when you are in love, there is a special attraction between the two partners. There is a kind of attraction, a certain tension, which is released in the sexual act. And then he says, or I am not Martinus, I guess also some of you here can understand that when you have been married to the same partner 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, maybe one of the partners could dream of a new partner. They met another very attractive person at the job or outside there. So sometimes the marriages will end up with a divorce because they feel a stronger sexual attraction to another person because they sort of have been sexually satiated with the same partner all the time. But then Martinus writes that it should be possible to be married to the same person for 3 or 4 consecutive lives. But then there is no sexual attraction between the two partners. But then he says they can be born as brother and sister because they know each other very well and they are thinking sort of almost in the same way. But normally there are no sexual attraction between brothers and sisters. So there could be old partners. But what I would just say, there can also be young people who say, I've had the same partner since I was 15 till I was married. So apparently we can also have a repetition with the same person for several lives. When Martinus talked about it, he could say that there are, when it comes to marriage or partnership, people can have a certain type. They love a certain type. And that is based on if you have had a very successful marriage with a certain type. Then in the next life you've forgotten about that, but it's sort of built in you that your partner should be in a special way. I have a little story from when I went to school. And then each year there was a big ball for all pupils at the school. And then it was almost like in France with all these dances where you should march, and it was very, very fine. And then it was very prestigious if you could march with the nicest girl in the class. But you could not ask her too many months before the school ball. And there was also always other boys who were quicker than me, and they took always the nice girls. But what I remember, and I wonder very much, there was a girl, she was quite nice, but she had brown eyes. That was no-go. But with blue eyes, yes. I don't know where it comes from. To me, it was rather strange, but I could impossibly ask a girl with brown eyes. I couldn't do it. So I think I'm trying to explain a certain type. So if you have been married to not necessarily the same person, but maybe the same type, you will have this instinct in you as when you are young that it should be in this way. And that should also be an argument that against this, some says, I have had the same partner since I was 15 the whole life. So my proposition should be, if you have had the same type, you can sort of have this repetition with one person, even though it's more normal that when you're young you have more different partners. I also have chosen some symbols, and I would like to show some symbols to explain this a little bit more. This is symbol number 6, the living being. And Martinus explains the living being is a unity. It cannot be divided. But in the analysis, he can divide it into 3 different parts. And here at the top, we have, it's a little bit delay because of the electronics. This part he calls the I, the self. This is X1, and it is white, and it is our inner kernel. Whenever we say I see, I eat, I listen, you refer to this center in yourself. But he says that the I is not created. It has no details. All created things have had a beginning and will have an end. But something that is eternal cannot have a start and cannot have an end. And all created things, they have different details, but there is something that is not created, that has never had a beginning and will never have an end. And he explains that this is with white color because it is not nothing, but it is everything that exists. But it is impossible to experience everything that exists. And in his analogy, he says that this white contains all the different colors. We also say the color from the sun is white. But if you have a prism, a lot of people have them in their window on a string, and it's very beautiful in sunshine to see that the white light is not colorless. The white light contains all colors. But when you take all colors together, they are white sort of. That is his analysis. We have an unchangeable, eternally the same. That is the I, the self. And then here down we have the world of energies, and that is the 6 basic energies of Martinus. But then there is the mother energy, which can manipulate and use the energies in order to express itself, and it can also experience life through this mother energy. And here we have the eternal body, the body of eternity. And these are talent kernels for using all the energies. For all eternity, we have a talent for using the energy of instinct, the energy of gravity, the energy of feeling, intelligence, intuition, and memory. These are eternal talent kernels. But I mentioned these talent kernels that can be created during several lives. They can be stored in the eternal body. And for that reason, they can never become lost. And I think it's so simple and so ingenious when Martinus says that evolution is based on accumulation of information. Each time when you have collected information, you have developed, you have become cleverer and cleverer. But then you cannot understand it from a materialistic point of view. It takes an eternal world picture, which is based on that all living beings are eternal living beings. And the sum of all living beings is the universe, and the universe has been a living being for all eternity. And that makes this, for me, much more logical with such a model for an evolution. Just simply, each time when you have collected an information, you have become cleverer. And when it cannot get lost, you can store it here in this body of eternity. And this here is the physical body. Then I would just shortly show this symbol. And this is symbol number 18, and it is the arcs of fate of the living being. And Martinus has here made this lines, 2 lines here, and this is a symbol of the principle of reincarnation. And the yellow color symbolizes the past, and the green color symbolizes the future. And this, between these 2 lines, symbolize the present life. With violet color, that is the superphysic, the paranormal energies or the spiritual energies, and the orange color symbolize the physical body. And these are previous reincarnations, and these are coming reincarnations. And from this figure you can see this is sort of more dark. It becomes lighter and lighter and lighter, and here it gets lighter and lighter. That should symbolize that we are developing towards the light. Often we make a lot of mistakes, but in a way that is the most precious experiences we can do, because if we shall do the right thing, we shall also know what is wrong. And there was one collaborator who asked Martinus, "Hi, how can I develop somewhat faster?" "Go out in the world and make a lot of stupid things," he humorously answered. Because if you make a lot of mistakes, you get a feedback and then you become cleverer and cleverer. It harms to make these experiences, but they are very valuable. So we get cleverer and cleverer all the time. We get more and more experienced because it can be collected in the eternal body. And then we have here our present karma, and Martinus explains all energy that is sent out by a living being will return to this being. So this is the present fate of the living being, and it gets the results of something it has done here in this life, but it can come from a previous life or 2 or 3 lives back in time. But the reason why I have chosen to show this symbol, because I would like to point on these 4 previous lives. In Livets Bog, Martinus writes that our last incarnation, we will have a repetition of that in the late 20s. And I would translate that. You will have a repetition of your past life between 26 and 30 years. So in principle, what you experience in that time, that was the main themes of the last life you had. Then he said in the mid-20s, and I would translate that to, you will have a repetition of this life between 24 and 26 years. Maybe in that life you had a big fight with your partner and it resulted in a divorce and it was a very unhappy situation. Then in this light, you might, when you are 25 years, have a big problem in your present relationship. And that will be the same themes, but now you have had the experience once and maybe you can learn from it and act in a little somewhat other way. So all good things and bad things sort of, we have a repetition of that. And then he says that the life number 3 and 4 before, that is in the beginning of the 20s. So these 2 lives might be from 20 to 24. And the logic is, if you have learned a thing once, it takes less time to learn it in this life. And if you have learned a thing 2 times, you can have a repetition that is even faster. For example, once I learned French, I've forgotten everything. I have to start over again. But the second time, it went faster than the first time. So when you then go back in time, it goes very, very fast. And the human embryo that are 9 months in mother's womb are actually making a repetition of almost the whole animal kingdom. So that would say there are millions and millions of years you can make a repetition in the embryo stage. And also as a child you can have a repetition of many lives in a very short period. just because you have experienced it once and you have made so many repetitions. So the next repetition would be even faster. And this is the defective organism and the fate element. And that is because I would like to talk a little bit more on the talent kernels. And the talent kernels are these round figures. They have different colors, which means we have different kind of talents. And they can be maybe at the A stage or C stage, so you can have them develop to different degrees. And with violet color, he has the body of eternity. But there is this orange circle. That is some very special talent kernels. They are talent kernels for creating organs or for creating an organism. And they can become defected if you mistreat your organism. And that depends on your lifestyle. I don't know what it's called in English, but in Danish we talk about lifestyle sickness, lifestyle illnesses. And we have 5 that is very famous in television. That is, if you are smoking very much, if you are drinking alcohol, if you are eating very fat animal food, if you eat a lot of sugar, and if you exercise too little. Then you can destroy different talent kernels by this lifestyle. And in television they tell if you practice maybe 1, 2, 3 of these lifestyle bad habits, you are in the risk of getting diabetes too, because you are mistreating your organism. And there are some arrows here. These are the talent kernels where all the information is to create your organs or to create your organism. When we are born as human beings, we have all the talent kernels for creating a physical body. And when the arrow goes in this direction, that should say the information in the DNA molecules are used for creating a body. But there is also an arrow on the opposite direction. Here you are sort of destroying a talent. You are destroying the organism. And then you are destroying one specific organ. And then if you do that for years and years, and Martinus say it can take 3 or 4 lives to destroy one talent kernel, but then you have to abuse yourself for 3 or 4 lives. And that will destroy the talent kernels for creating a normal body. And he has published an article called Mental Suicide. And it is, the most of these examples is when you are drinking too much alcohol. And it starts in one life where you drink a lot of alcohol, but in the next life, you start to drink alcohol at an earlier age, because now you should have a repetition of this life where you have been drinking a lot of alcohol. And alcohol is very destructive for the brain. It is also a solvent, so the fat tissue is also damaged by these properties. And you also get confused by this. It's very toxic. And then in this article, this on mental suicide, he explains that then maybe in the 3rd life when you are born, you start to drink almost like a big child, and the 5th life, even almost you start to drink as a child, and then you can be born disabled. He doesn't say it specifically, but I think I would dare to say then you can become born with Down's syndrome. Down syndrome, then you can see at the DNA molecules at least, even in a microscope, that the chromosomes are so defected that they can only give a defected organism. So that can be Yeah, very, very serious. But it is not wasted. Then you've done something wrong, and you've had a lot of sufferings and a lot of pain. And Martinus says that gives us the most precious talents we can get. When you have suffered much yourself, you can feel with others who are suffering. When you have had all this pain and so on, you can make a fantasy of how they're feeling. So the result of all your own sufferings is love and compassion. So it is absolutely not wasted that you have these painful experiences. And if you look here, we will see there is some blue talent kernels that are damaged and also some green ones. And that is the new energies that we are going to use. We have instincts and gravity and feelings, but the new intellectual energies that we are developing here as terrestrial man, that is the energy of intelligence and the energy of intuition. They are very new, so they are like small plants. They can't take so much heat, or they are very fragile. So these organs for intelligence and intuition, they are very fragile, so they can be damaged. And he says that alcohol can damage them. He has also talked somewhat about LSD and narcotic drugs and so on. You can have some very strange spiritual experiences. But he says that would damage the areas in the brain that are prepared for cosmic consciousness. If I'm not totally wrong, I guess it is in the Danish article collection 1, article number 7, paragraph 12 to 14. But I might be wrong. It's a little bit dairy. It could also be article number 9, but now it's on Crowdcast, so then you can check me out. So it's sort of rather risky. But there he explains that there are parts in our brain which are prepared for cosmic consciousness. And that is also one of the places where I think Martinus really talks about intelligent design. Because according to the Darwinism, you can only develop organs that give an advantage in the struggle for life. But these are not used yet. They cannot give any advantage because they are not used. And then, according to Darwinism, they would die out. But they are prepared for it. And he tells, when we get to church and the priest is preaching some religious teaching and we should be good and loving people and so on, that is a kind of bombardment of these new cells. And you can sit there every Sunday, year after year, or maybe several lives, but you still listen to these religious people. And that is affecting these new brain areas, and they are sort of becoming developed. And all Martinus' work, the whole of Martinus' work, is written on the basis of his intuition. So when we try to study the book of Martinus, we are training our intuition. And that would say then they are also becoming bombarded with an intuitive analysis. For that reason, we are gradually opening these brain centers. And in that area, he writes about some of these kind of new teaching have a different frequency, and the higher the frequency is, the higher the teaching is. So, and Martinus also once had a collaborator, Erik Gunnar Larsson. He told in a recorded lecture, question period, and then he said that first time he explained symbols to Gunnar Larsson, he fell asleep when he came to symbol number 3. But and he was, excuse me, Martinus, that is also, if we're only talking together 2 persons and one will fall asleep, how would you take that? But I think Martinus, he might have been proud, I don't know, but he says to Gerner Larsson, that is because you are using the new brain centers. And when they are so delicate, it takes more work. So when people are sleeping to my lectures, I say, oh, it's good, Ole. Now they are using the new brain centers. Instead of becoming in despair. So I guess that is also why they are so delicate and fine, these new brain centers for intuition and green color. He didn't write or talk about it in the tape recordings, but I guess that's not by chance that it is those. For example, the red ones, they are not affected. That is the old animal instincts. You have used them for millions and millions of years, and they are more robust, they are more strong. But the new delicate things, they could be damaged. And then here at the end, I would like to explain the relationship between a person's talent kernels and then sort of the organism. So there are two kinds of talent kernels. We have our talent kernels in our super consciousness. They are stored in the eternal body. And then we have talent kernels in our genes. I would say that a gene is a talent for a certain characteristic. And I could also say that more and more new research shows that there are genes for spiritual, for intellectual diseases and abilities. So it looks as if that the genes have more importance than the environment, but the environment enables us to have this repetition. So if Martinus, we should put Martinus together and this evolution, then he would say that heredity and repetition is the same single factor that enable us to use our talents from our eternal past. They shall be transferred, and they can be transferred through the repetition, but also through the awakening of the talent kernels. And for example, if my parents, like a couple of parents, have five talents, but I do only have 2 talents, and there is no match. So I cannot incarnate with these parents. Or if I have destroyed some talent kernels and here are healthy, then there is a law for repulsion, attraction and repulsion. And in the world of atoms and electrons, there are electric magnetic forces. But also the consciousness, there are also electrical and magnetic forces. So that means when a child or a person who are discarnated are ready for a new incarnation, it is attracted to exactly the right parents in an automatical way, because it is due to the law of attraction and repulsion. And if there are parents with 3 talents, and I have the same 3 talents, there is a natural attraction. And you cannot choose your own parents consciously in the spiritual world. That goes totally automatically through this law of attraction and repulsion. So to me, it's very logical and a very nice theory of evolution. I think it's so logical that the evolution is based on collection of information. My time is out. Thank you for your interest.